a beloved and admired young man mysteriously vanishes, leaving behind a cloud of suspicion. His unwavering, determined family and friends embark on a relentless quest to uncover his whereabouts. What happened to 23-year-old Julian Williams? What happens when love becomes fatal? This is the Fatal Attraction Podcast with Caught in a Web.
He'd overcome tragedy to make a fresh start.
This was an injury that should have killed him.
He has beat the odds, survived.
I always referred to him as my miracle grandchild.
He was happy and full of life.
And he was ready for love.
He kept talking about this girl he was going to meet.
Until he vanished without a trace.
Is he hurt? Is he being held? It was just a bad feeling at that point.
Do you have any idea where he was going?
The family knew that something was wrong.
But little can prepare them for what the investigation will reveal.
You never would have seen it coming. He had gone to Beach Island that evening to meet up with a female.
Oh, okay.
Someone lured him to the back of that trailer.
He got drawn into this violent relationship.
Are you scared?
Now, we got somebody that's missing, and this problem is not gonna go away.
He never stood a chance. It didn't have to end that way. One person knew he was gonna die that night.
March 26, 2017. It's a Sunday afternoon in Augusta, Georgia, a southern city with a small-town sensibility.
Augusta has a slower pace. Pretty much everybody knows everybody.
It is a very nice place to live. It's a great place to raise a family.
But while most residents are getting ready for Sunday dinner, Markeith Williams arrives at a downtown apartment to check on his son, 23-year-old Julian Williams.
Julian, you home?
Julian lived alone in an apartment downtown Augusta.
He was able to come and go, live on his own, but suffered from a disability.
He had short-term memory loss. So our family really did have to stay in touch with Julian a lot.
But earlier that day, Julian had gone silent.
He always answered our calls. If he didn't answer right away when I would call him, he would call me back to see what I wanted. Savannah was the first one to become alarmed. They talked every day.
When I couldn't get in touch with him, I called Julian's father and I was like, hey, have you heard from Julian?
His father starts getting worried, so he ends up going over to his apartment.
Julian, you in here?
When Markeith lets himself in, he's surprised to find that the apartment is empty.
I was like, okay, he had to went somewhere because he's not at home.
Is he hurt? Is he being held? Your mind just goes in circles.
Julian, you in there?
He could already sense that something was up.
Then, as Markeith makes his way further into the apartment, his sense of panic grows.
There is food left out on the kitchen counter.
It was like he left in a hurry.
Julian!
Baltimore native Julian Williams always had a very close relationship with his father.
I never seen any father and son bond like them. On the weekends, him and Julian would always be together.
I give him credit for being an awesome dad.
He'd raised an amazing son, too.
I didn't meet anybody that didn't like Julian. Julian was a very energetic person. He loved to go, 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 go. He would never sit down. He was always, oh, what are we gonna do next?
He made you smile even when you didn't feel like smiling.
He was a caring person. He was loved by a lot of people.
When Julian was in high school, his father's job brought the family to Augusta.
He had the opportunity to get a promotion, and he felt like it was a safe environment here.
Julian really did adapt to Augusta. You know, he was used to the fast life, but being in Augusta was okay. because he was going to school. He knew a lot of people.
But during his senior year, a tragedy nearly took Julian's life.
He was at a friend's house playing some video games.
Hey, what y'all think about this?
Yo, man, put that thing away.
Why?
It's the friend of a friend. Julian didn't know the person directly, and he's over there flashing a gun.
Are you scared?
He was showing off the weapon went off.
He shot in the left ventricle of his heart.
The doctors were very honest with us. They told us that it was a miracle that he was still living at that point.
They did emergency surgery. He had 20% chance to survive.
You're thinking the worst, honestly. You're thinking the worst.
But the worst never came to pass.
Well, in a matter of a couple days, Julian was out of ICU. He was a miracle.
However, Julian still had a long road ahead.
A loss of oxygen to his brain led to him having some short-term memory problems.
Julian did have to go stay at a rehab facility for a while to get back to dressing himself and taking a shower. So that was something he really did have to work toward.
He also worked hard to make sure he would still graduate with his classmates.
They worked with him on a daily basis, getting him ready for graduation. He made it through.
He was so excited when he graduated.
It was just a joyful moment.
Despite his success, lingering effects from his injury followed Julian into adulthood.
He wasn't able to hold down a real job.
He started on disability after the accident.
Although by the time he was 20, he'd become independent enough to have his own apartment in downtown Augusta.
His dad helped him in a lot of ways, with budgeting, making sure that his bills was paid, and he would take him to the grocery store.
Despite needing help with some practicalities, Julian thrived in his newfound freedom.
He had the answer to no one. He'd come home when he wanted to, stay out as late as he wanted to.
He had easy access to, places to go. He got a chance to frequent some of the restaurants.
He would always go out with friends, eat dinner, go to parties. His disability didn't affect his daily social life.
And as Julian became more independent, his confidence grew.
That enabled him to start dating and meeting people.
He had a lot of female friends.
But with one friend, 22-year-old Alicia Hall, the friendship had turned into something more, though it only lasted a few months.
It really didn't seem like it was a big preoccupation for him to have a serious relationship at that point. He seemed like he was happy, just living his life.
But now, on March 26, 2017, Julian has mysteriously disappeared from his downtown Augusta apartment.
There's food left out, and it looks like Julian left in a hurry.
It just didn't feel right.
Julian's father immediately contacts the apartment manager.
Management is quickly able to pull surveillance video of the activity of Julian the night before.
Security footage shows Julian coming out the apartment.
Outside, he walks to the nearest corner.
He is looking around on his phone, listening to music.
It looks like he was waiting on the cab.
Due to his disability, Julian didn't drive.
Julian would often get rides from me, his father, but when he couldn't get in touch with us or he wanted to go somewhere else, he would take a cab.
But where was Julian going?
It was critical for us to find out where he had gone.
My mind was going crazy.
Maybe he's in danger and can't even reach out to them.
A family's determination leads detectives closer to finding out the truth. Stay with us as we return with more of the Fatal Attraction podcast.
Five years after a near-fatal shooting, 23-year-old Julian Williams had put his life back together with determination and support from his loving family.
Julian fought very hard to overcome being shot. He wanted to live a normal life.
He never let his disability define him. When life gave him lemon, he made lemonade.
Everyone was happy, but kind of still cautious. In the back of your mind, you're still worried about some of the challenges that he had to face.
And now that Julian has disappeared, all those worries have come to the forefront.
The family definitely knew that something was wrong.
Julian's cousin started to get really concerned after texting him multiple times and not getting a response from him.
Once she told Julian's dad that she hadn't heard anything back, he went over to Julian's apartment.
Julian, you home?
However, reviewing security footage captured outside of Julian's apartment just 16 hours earlier gives his dad the first clue.
When we saw the security footage, I was like, okay, he's waiting on his cab.
But it was late, maybe midnight. Why would you be going out at midnight?
Unsure of where his son might have been headed, Julian's father reaches out to his niece, Savannah, who first raised the alarm that he was missing.
Julian and I was very close. We wouldn't describe our relationship as cousins. We always described it as brother and sister, because Julian and I would hang out every day pretty much.
When did you see him last?
Last night, they had gone to a basketball game at Payne College.
After I dropped him off at home, I didn't hear anything from him. And that was strange because we would stay up all night playing iMessage games.
Do you have any idea where he was going?
Maybe. At the basketball game, I could tell something else had his attention.
This girl had been messaging him.
Who was it?
I don't know. Julian didn't tell me at all who this girl was. And that was kind of strange because I knew all the female friends that he had.
Thanks, Savannah. I appreciate it.
Armed with the information that Julian may have been going out for a late-night date, the family meets up to take the next steps in trying to find him.
We put up flyers everywhere in the area he lived in.
We put out many flyers, trying to make people aware, have you seen him? You know, he looks like this, he's this height, he was wearing this. So we was trying to get the word out that he was missing, and his family loves him, and was trying to get him back home.
The family also hopes they can track down the cab that had picked Julian up.
In that area, they have clubs downtown, and there are cabs that are passing by. So we had the flyers, we'd wave down the cabs as they came, and we would ask the cab drivers.
But after several hours of handing out flyers and hailing cabs, Julian's father starts to lose hope.
It's getting late now. And he was like, you know, I don't think we're gonna find the cab driver.
Right before they finish, Julian's father sees a cab driver, and they reach out and flag that cab driver.
And as soon as he rolls down the window, we show him the missing persons flyer. And I knew right then he knew Julian.
Yeah, I have. He's from Maryland, right?
The driver tells the family that he drove Julian regularly, and they'd gotten to know each other.
He had a relationship with this cab driver, you know? This wasn't just someone that he picked up sometime. They would have conversations. And he knew about Julian moving down here.
The cab driver also knew where Julian had gone the night he disappeared.
What he said was, yeah, I picked him up here.
Where you headed?
Spiderweb Road.
Oh, get on in. You sure about this?
Spiderweb Road was just across the river from Augusta in the community of Beach Island, South Carolina.
But the driver also says he tried to warn Julian against going to the isolated neighborhood.
I told him not to be around that way.
This particular area was not known for anything good, I would say.
It's a rural type of area, but kind of a seedy area, what I would consider to be a high crime area. It's also just not a good place to be late at night.
The driver says that when they reach their destination, he once again cautioned Julian.
We're here.
He said, you sure you want to get out here? It's dark, it's isolated.
You sure about this?
Oh, yeah. The cab driver stated, he said, just let me take you home.
The driver says Julian seemed really excited for his date.
Oh, but she worth it.
Julian showed him a picture.
Oh, okay.
He was clear. She's waiting for me. This is the place.
Yo, thank you, man. Thank you.
The cab driver just returned to Augusta.
And he left from there.
Between what Savannah told Markeith earlier and the cab driver story, the family now has their first solid lead on Julian's whereabouts.
He was able to give the direct address that he took him to.
The location is in our hands now. We have got to go ourselves and find him.
Within minutes, Julian's family is racing across the bridge to Beach Island.
It is some of the loneliest dirt roads you'd ever want to see.
The address the cab driver gave them appears just as desolate.
This looks like an old abandoned house.
Julian, you in there?
Julian's father was relentless when it came to trying to find his son.
Julian!
Whatever it took to bring him home, that's what he was gonna do.
Julian!
A family's determination leads detectives closer to finding out the truth. Stay with us as we return with more of the Fatal Attraction podcast.
Julian Williams' family has just arrived at the remote location where the missing 23-year-old had last been seen.
Julian, you in there?
It was an abandoned trailer off of Spiderweb Road in Beach Island.
Julian!
After knocking, Julian's father, Markeith, tries the door and finds it unlocked.
He was going to go and bring Julian home. If he was to be found, he was gonna find him.
But the trailer is empty and looks like it's been that way for a long time. With no sign of Julian at the location, his family heads back home and contacts the authorities.
They was just on panic mode.
He's on blackmail. He's disabled.
Okay, and you mean like he's in a wheelchair or?
No, not physically that way.
I was worried about his short-term memory loss because I was thinking, okay, maybe he went down there and couldn't remember how to get home.
Law enforcement was kind of in a catch-22 because, you know, as a grown adult, you have the right to go somewhere and not tell anybody where you're going.
But when somebody with a disability goes missing, you've got to factor in his disability, and that magnified the danger towards him.
When Julian's family finally meets with detectives the following morning, they fill them in on what they learned from the cab driver.
We did know that Julian had gone to Beach Island that evening to meet up with a female.
The family says they went to the spot where the cab driver says he dropped Julian off.
So you say the trailer was empty?
Yeah, it looked like it was abandoned.
Which obviously was very suspicious.
After taking the missing persons report, detectives focused their efforts on Julian's last known location.
We believed he went to South Carolina, but we had really no proof that anything happened in South Carolina. So that causes a lot of jurisdictional problems between police agencies because there's different rules over there than over here.
And with no evidence of foul play, South Carolina authorities are reluctant to get involved.
So we would go over there and ride around. We're just knocking on doors, trying to talk to people. Did you see anything? Have you seen this guy? Do you know Julian Williams? Showing them the poster, that kind of thing.
Few people in the area are willing to talk.
People that were out on Spiderweb Road were not excited to see anybody from law enforcement out there. Basically, there was nothing fruitful gained from the canvas.
Shut out by the people on Spiderweb Road, police urged Julian's family to turn to the local media.
We did TV interviews. We did radio interviews. We had to let everyone know that we were looking for Julian, and we were not going to stop. Every day, we were putting up signs. If you went to the basketball court, there were flyers all around it. If you went to a grocery store, if you went to the barbershop, if you went to the gas station, you saw his flyer.
There was a lot of buzz around town about anybody seeing Julian Williams.
While the family continues trying to generate leads, detectives subpoena Julian's cell phone records and make an ominous discovery.
There's no more indication of Julian on his cell phone. Once the cab driver dropped him off, everything went dead. So, it was just a bad feeling at that point.
The feeling gets worse when detectives dig into the number Julian had been texting on the night he disappeared.
Supposedly, the number belonged to the woman that Julian was supposed to meet up with on Spiderweb Road.
Looking into the number, they realized that this is a fake number. It's coming from like a website. It wasn't actually a cell phone that was texting him. This was being done over a computer. It's a spoof, basically. Investigators feel like someone was intentionally luring Julian out there. Obviously, we have to figure out who would want to hurt Julian Williams.
When detectives asked the family if anyone had a grudge against Julian, they suggested maybe the young man who shot him 5 years earlier, 24-year-old Michael Harrison.
Julian testified against him, and he helped put him in jail just a few years ago.
He only got like a year and some change in jail because it was an accident.
He's the only person who has a clear motive who might want to harm Julian. At this point, he's a strong suspect.
But when detectives look into Harrison, they quickly rule out the possibility of his involvement.
Police find out that he was in jail on unrelated charges at the time of Julian's disappearance.
However, just as detectives are stalling out on their investigation, Julian's father gets a mysterious text from another unfamiliar number.
He got a text message saying, "Someone paid me to beat your son up."
Someone kidnapped him, beat him up, and made him walk home. That's when we knew it was foul play.
At this point now, we know something bad has happened to Julian.
A family's determination leads detectives closer to finding out the truth. Stay with us as we return with more of the Fatal Attraction podcast.
Julian Williams has been missing more than 72 hours when his father receives a mysterious text message claiming that the 23-year-old had been kidnapped.
The text message came from an unknown number, so we was very unsure of who it was.
It said something to the effect of, "We took your son and we beat him up and then we left him on the side of the road."
We're excited when we get the text message because it gives us a glimmer of hope. But there is no big celebration or anything because we still don't have Julian back home.
The text doesn't say where to find Julian, but it does suggest who's behind the kidnapping.
According to whoever sent the text, Julian's former girlfriend, Alicia Hall, paid him to beat Julian up.
She was a recent ex, this girl.
The text message goes on to say that Alicia was mad because Julian was talking to other girls.
After Julian's father passes the tip on to detectives, they bring Alicia in for questioning.
Maybe we were going to be able to bring this family, some answers.
Would like to ask you a few questions about Julian Williams.
Is he in some sort of trouble?
His ex-girlfriend was very surprised about Julian's being missing.
Oh my God, I had no idea.
Alicia said it's been a few weeks since she even spoke with him.
Has there been any tension with you and Julian?
No, not at all.
She said they ended on good terms. She still was friends with Julian.
So you didn't ask anyone to beat him up?
What are you talking about?
She was like, "No, I don't know anything. I don't know where he could be."
Looking into the text message that claimed she was involved suggests Alicia is telling the truth.
When detectives look into this number that texts Julian's father, they realize that it was another number that was made with the exact same spoofing app as the number that was used to contact Julian.
It was someone trying to throw us off track.
Days pass with little movement in the investigation. But as word of Julian's disappearance spreads, a friend from his hometown of Baltimore calls Markeith with new information.
When the friend learned that Julian was a missing person, that's when he's like, okay, I need to get this to somebody.
The friend contacted the family and said that Julian texted him the night of his disappearance.
But that's not all that Julian's friend tells his father.
They said Julian had originally said, "Hey, I'm going to see this girl." He dropped a picture of her.
He sent the picture with a message of, "She's waiting for me. I'm going to meet her," something to that effect.
The picture looked legit, like an actual person, because it was just an average girl. You know, she wasn't like a supermodel or anything.
After receiving the photo from Julian's friend, Markeith passes it on to detectives, hoping the woman can lead them to Julian.
This was a crucial piece of evidence, the photo that police needed of the person who may have had the last interaction with Julian Williams.
But the photo, like the phone number and the text message, turns out to be fake.
Turns out it was like some picture off the internet.
That was the bait that brought Julian to Beach Island, South Carolina.
It was initially a lot of hope, and then, kind of almost back at square one.
However, evidence that someone went to great lengths to lure Julian out to Spiderweb Road may be enough to convince the South Carolina authorities to open an investigation.
By this point in the case, we had grown very close to the family, and you could just feel the depth of their grief. And it was bad enough that their son was missing, but it was even worse that all they were really left with at that point was kind of like their wildest imaginations about the things that could have happened. And I went over to the South Carolina solicitor and sat down and met with him, laid out my whole case, like, this is why we believe that something bad has happened to Julian.
The authorities in South Carolina agree with the Augusta investigators' assessment.
That's when the Aiken County Sheriff's Office was like, okay, we'll go out there and we'll conduct a search.
The next morning, Aiken County and Richmond County responded to the abandoned trailer on Spiderweb Road where Julian had been dropped off that night by the cab driver.
We know that he's off Spiderweb Road. I mean, all signs were pointing to Spiderweb Road. And if nothing else, we were hopeful that we would be able to find something that would give us another lead.
And it isn't long before they make an alarming discovery.
One of our deputies walked behind the trailer and found a .40 caliber spent shell casing just laying on top of the grass, and found additionally 2 more .40 caliber shell casings behind the trailer.
Then, barely 100 yards into the woods behind the trailer, detectives find something far worse. A body.
He was in a very shallow grave.
They tried to conceal him, but you could still see him in the ground.
The body is a black male, same build, same size as Julian Williams.
My heart dropped. On the one hand, all of your hard work has just paid off, but he's still dead.
A family's determination leads detectives closer to finding out the truth. Stay with us as we return with more of the Fatal Attraction podcast.
A month after Julian Williams went missing in Augusta, Georgia, detectives have located what they believe are his remains just across the river in South Carolina.
He was found directly behind where the cab driver had dropped him off.
The remains were a black male, about Julian's size.
So all of that put together, we knew that we were looking at Julian Williams.
While it will take an autopsy to confirm that the body is Julian, detectives don't wait to inform the family.
We didn't want them to find out from anybody else.
The news brings the long search for Julian to a devastating end.
It was like the worst day of my life. That day, it was like living hell because I lost my best friend.
That day was a very hard day. We have been searching for Julian for a month by now. And, just to take that hope away was the most gut-wrenching feeling.
Finding Julian does bring his father some comfort.
I'm glad they brought my boy home. That was the biggest thing waiting. It's been over a month now. He's been missing, and we're just glad that, we can have some closure and bring him home.
But other family members admit they won't be satisfied until his killer is behind bars.
I don't find closure in finding him because that's not the end of it. It's the beginning.
We were getting one step closer to finding out what happened.
When the autopsy results come in, they confirm the body is Julian. and that he'd been shot 3 times.
2 bullet projectiles were recovered from his body, along with bullet fragments of one that had splintered off.
They were .40 caliber rounds, a match for the shell casings that detectives found behind the trailer.
The location of the wounds also provide detectives with additional details about the murder.
Julian had been shot twice in the torso and once in the back of the head. That's execution style.
It was just shocking to hear. We just couldn't imagine who would do something like this.
With little other evidence to point them to their killer, detectives dive deeper into Julian's phone records and soon turn up a new lead.
They go back a few weeks to see what type of communication he was having. They realize that he's having assistant communication with one specific number, and they trace that number back to a woman by the name of Kendra Pearson.
Even more intriguing, Kendra doesn't live far from where Julian was murdered.
She lived on Bell Drive, which was near the abandoned trailer on Spiderweb Road where they had found the body.
When detectives bring Kendra in for questioning, she readily admits to knowing Julian.
She said we went to high school together.
We had just gotten back in touch recently, started hanging out.
She really did like my brother because he was kind. He was very gentle, understanding.
They'd hung out a few times, then they got even friendlier.
They even started to have sex once in a while.
But there was a complication.
She had been in an intimate relationship with the victim while still living with her boyfriend.
His name is Antonio Simpkins.
They had 2 kids together, but they had a relationship that was really on rocks.
This was just kind of a toxic relationship.
Did Julian know about Antonio?
No.
But according to Kendra, Antonio had eventually found out about Julian.
Kendra said that Antonio had gone through her phone and found a text that she had sent Julian.
Antonio Simpkins saw this, and that's when he absolutely lost it. He was enraged.
She entangled Julian in this violent relationship she was in with her kid's father, a relationship that wasn't healthy.
Julian was way different from what she had.
He was this kind, soft-spoken kind of person that was full of life, loved to smile, loved to joke. And there is a part of me that believes that who wouldn't want that?
I'm so sorry. I never meant for Julian to get hurt.
The girl was scared. She was really scared.
Antonio Simpkins was a jealous man.
But was he jealous enough to kill?
When Antonio saw the text, what did it say?
He just went crazy.
What did it say?
This girl had told Julian that she might be pregnant with his child.
A family's determination leads detectives closer to finding out the truth. Stay with us as we return with more of the Fatal Attraction podcast.
Detectives have just learned that days before Julian Williams' disappearance, a woman named Kendra Pearson had texted him to say she might be pregnant with his baby.
She said she texted Julian to let him know she was pregnant with his child.
The young lady volunteered information with the police. She cooperated with the police.
Kendra also tells police that her boyfriend, 26-year-old Antonio Simpkins, found the text she'd sent to Julian.
He confronts her with it, and this created a huge fight between the couple.
Kendra also believes their fight led directly to Julian's murder.
He just couldn't let it go and ended up leaving the house.
Later on that evening, they're at home, and he's real angry and left the house at some point with a gun.
She asked him, what are you going to do?
In her gut, she knew that Antonio had something to do with this.
Did Antonio tell you what he did?
No.
She just said, this is what I heard, this is what I saw, this is what I did. And she was honest with us.
It's all my fault, though.
What do you mean?
Come to find out, Kendra wasn't pregnant.
don't know what her reasoning was, but it turned out not to be true.
She thought that was gonna be a way to get away from her baby daddy.
Who would believe that? It is a tragedy. Her efforts to have something better and her efforts to have something she didn't have, he got drawn into this circle of all this baggage that she had.
You're free to go.
After talking to Kendra, detectives go directly to Antonio's house, less than a mile from the crime scene, and conduct a short interview.
I know that you and this boy are both dealing with this girl.
I didn't do nothing wrong. I didn't kill anybody.
He was confronted with everything that we had at that time, but he denied any involvement whatsoever.
He does reveal that, yes, he knew that Kendra may have been pregnant. However, he says he would never get into a fight over no female.
I never met this man in person. I've never seen this man a day in my life. I've never contacted this man.
In fact, he says his girlfriend Kendra is just trying to seek revenge and throw him under the bus because they've had a fight.
It's just crazy how she just threw me out there like that.
However, detectives are convinced he's lying, and they're determined to find proof.
We did do a search warrant at the residence after the interview.
Detectives don't find a possible murder weapon, but they do confiscate Antonio's phone.
They look into the phone and they find this Pinger app that he used to spoof Julian. They find the photo that was pulled from the internet.
The picture really was kind of what did Antonio Simpkins in.
That picture directly linked Julian Williams, the victim, to the suspect, Antonio Simpkins.
This is essentially game over.
When detectives haul Antonio in for more questioning later that same day, his story changes.
I'll be honest, I told him I just want to talk to him.
He did confess to luring Julian Williams over to the abandoned trailer on Spiderweb Road.
Antonio claims he was just planning to lure Julian out, rough him up, scare him off a little bit so that he wouldn't have any contact with Kendra Pearson ever again.
Okay, well, tell us what happened.
An altercation.
Got an altercation.
Just fighting. I had a gun. He grabbed him. We were fighting over it.
Antonio claimed that the shooting was an accident.
According to Antonio, there was a struggle and the gun went off.
I ain't mean for it to happen like that. If he would have just let the gun go, I was going to let him leave.
Detectives don't believe any of it.
According to the autopsy, Antonio shot Julian 3 times.
One bullet was to the back of the head, execution style.
How do you accidentally shoot someone in the back of the head? You can't.
Once the interview is over, detectives book Antonio on murder and kidnapping charges.
I was really heartbroken when I found out that he did it. Julian didn't know him at all. So it's like, how do you have beef with a person that you don't know?
When Antonio goes on trial on April 2nd, 2019, prosecutors open by arguing that Julian's death was a clear case of premeditated murder.
This was nothing but revenge. You have someone who was upset that their girlfriend was messing around with another man.
Antonio Simpkins armed himself prior to going out there. Antonio Simpkins lured and baited the victim over to this specific, remote, abandoned, desolate location, away from anyone else.
Julian, by all accounts, had no idea what he was walking into.
Antonio waited until the cab drove away, stepped out of the shadows, and then pulled his gun on Julian. He orders Julian to walk to the back of the mobile home.
He doesn't even have a clue that this girl's boyfriend is mad.
It just doesn't have to be.
And he never will.
Some baby, man, please. Come on, please. Please, man, I'm just asking, man. Let's...
Antonio Simpkins shoots the victim twice.
Then, once Julian was down, Antonio fired one final shot.
He just shot him in the back of the head.
He never stood a chance.
When it's the defense's turn, they continue arguing Antonio's claim that the shooting was nothing more than a tragic accident.
Antonio's defense team sticks to the story that he struggled with Julian over the gun and the gun went off.
However, the defense's arguments fail to sway the jury, and they find Antonio Simpkins guilty of first-degree murder.
Justice was served.
The judge, he slammed the gavel down and said life without parole. And you're just numb after that. That chapter is closed.
But Julian's family has mixed feelings about the verdict.
Justice from a legal perspective, yes, it was served. But there is no amount of justice because he's gone.
I can't see his smile. I can't answer FaceTime. We can't play games. We can't go shopping. It was joyful, but at the same time, that don't bring anyone back.
All Julian's family can cling to now are the precious memories they have of him.
He overcame so much, and he had a good perspective on life. I think back about all those fun times that we had, that he was happy and full of life.
There's a void. We miss him.
With modern technology, catfishing and deceit have become cunning ingredients for betrayal and even murder. Julian Williams was a loved and admired young man who did not deserve to die. While technology is often used for progress worldwide, we must remain mindful of those who use it for malicious evil. Coming up on the next episode of the Fatal Attraction Podcast.
He dreamed of having a family with the love of his life.
He really wanted to have children.
But his wife couldn't have kids.
They had worked out an arrangement.
They'd be able to have a child of their own thanks to the surrogate.
He was just real excited.
But he will never hold his newborn.
What is your emergency, ma'am?
He was beat to death in his own home.
Tommy Brown was in a great place in his life and about to become a father. What could go wrong? But something does, and his sister and loved ones want answers. Tune in to the next episode of the Fatal Attraction Podcast. We will see you in the next episode.